I recently discovered this term and I have become quite enamored with this concept. And I've been thinking a lot about it over the past couple of days. It's called rewilding, and it is mostly applied and used, and in the context I found it, to conservation efforts. And I'll just read a couple of the definitions or a summary of rewilding that I found. That it's a large scale conservation strategy that involves restoring ecosystems to a natural state so they can take care of themselves. Restoring ecosystems to a natural state so they can take care of themselves. And why I've been really interested and I've been thinking through this concept of rewilding is not as it applies to conservation of ecology and ecosystems, but as it applies to the self. How can I apply this concept of rewilding to Todd Hines, to my growth, to my development? And how can I use some of these principles to bring myself back to myself? What does that mean? Myself back to myself. Okay, it's not this idea of regression, certainly. It's not going back to, the essence I was as a less developed person, a child, for example. Now, there are childish qualities, I think, that I would like to revisit. A natural sense of curiosity, wonder, freedom to say and speak and be myself, maybe without so much regard to, what people may think or, um, input from society, so to speak. But rewilding, not in the sense to lose anything productive that I've developed over time, but to strip away some of these things that I've picked up through life, now in 40 years of life. And so, how can I get back to my own natural states of being? And how can I use rewilding as this lens through which to look at getting back to the wild side, to the natural side of myself, and allowing these natural expressions and the essence of who I am really shine uninhibited. And just like any ecosystem, some things that come out are ugly, and nature is cruel. And wild can be fierce, and wild is not always pleasant, and wild can be dangerous. And this is absolutely not permission for myself or any type of desire to act out or to exemplify qualities of nature that can appear violent or self-serving. No, these are holistic systems. And how can I develop as myself to be a holistic system in and of myself? I think it implies that I am acting holistically with my larger system. I do not exist in a bubble or in a vacuum. I am connected to friends, to family, to work, to a purpose. And so, how can I use rewilding to be more in balance with my larger habitat, my larger ecosystem? And I think a lot of that is taking more ownership and more responsibility for me being the healthiest and most natural version of myself. Natural as in, and as I'm speaking through this, I'm starting to think about what is the most natural version of myself. Um, it's not being emotionally reactive to any feeling that might come up. It's not basing behavior or acting on whatever thought might come into my mind and saying, well, this is just natural because this is really me. No, it's much more nuanced and complex than that. I think restoring natural ecosystems is more about taking away so much of the artificial that I've built up, and these constructions that I've built up, mostly in mind. The vast majority of this is mental. These are mental frameworks. This is like my operating system that runs. And so coming back to a rewilding, a restoration of these operating systems, and revisiting what I've created, what artificial constructs I've created, and just checking those and assessing those and seeing, do those fit in with a larger, healthy, balanced ecosystem? And what can I do to be most responsible to craft that in a way that makes my personal ecosystem healthy and allows me to be the most healthy participant in the greater ecosystem outside of myself, this connected world that I live in, the collective soul of humanity. So let's look at more about this concept of rewilding as it applies to conservation. So the three pillars of rewilding: restoring natural processes, reintroducing species, and creating biodiverse habitats. So the first one, restoring natural processes. Rewilding allows natural processes to shape the land and sea, repairing damaged ecosystem and restoring degraded landscapes. Okay, interesting. So as this applies to mental frameworks, my thought processes, restoring natural processes. So what are some of the scripts that I run that when an external stimulus will happen, this is how I automatically react? Or when I have something that comes in through my senses, what thought is normally greeting that? So for example, if I were to hear some critical feedback in my work, for example, is what is my response to automatically be defensive? Is my response to automatically feel badly? That would be something to relook at restoring, because that's a construct. I don't have to feel badly, and I don't have to get defensive. So what would be a natural response? Well, I could imagine a natural response to critical feedback to be curiosity. A natural response to critical feedback to be gratitude. That feedback is a gift. Now, that doesn't mean that if I'm presented critical feedback in an intentionally hurtful or demeaning way from somebody else, that I will accept that. I think borders are an incredibly natural process. For example, I've seen maps of I believe it's wolves. Maybe mountain lions. Either way, we're talking about an apex predator, and there are ranges, there are territories, and in order for these predators to survive in any given geography, they establish among themselves territories, and they do not cross into the other territories. And they've actually done tracking, and they've tracked these animals, and they've been able to watch through this GPS tracking how these animals move, and they stay in very distinct territories. And I think this is a great example of a natural border, and how these natural borders help keep that species, help keep these predators thriving in any given geography, to use the resources that they have in that geography in a very balanced way. And that means honoring those boundaries. The second tenet here of rewilding, reintroducing species. Speaking of apex predators here, how about this? Rewilding can involve reintroducing species that are no longer naturally found in an area, such as apex predators. Definitely worth spending some time thinking on. What can I reintroduce that is no longer naturally found within my own internal ecosystem? What are some ferocious killer instincts that I've tamped down? I could see the drive to succeed, the commitment to meet my goals, the grit to overcome adversity, these embodying the spirit of an apex predator, um, a commitment, a dedication to provide for my family, to protect those I love, to be willing to use all force in order to lead with honor, myself and my family, and to be willing to fight for good. I think these things, these forces, these fierce and sometimes violent forces, never violent. Uh, violent as in not willfully taking down any other person or any other thing, not lashing out. Storms are violent. Hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis are incredibly violent. Nature is powerful. Nature is violent. And there's no desire on my part to embody violence. I think this comes into some of the shadow work that sometimes when we try to suppress the shadow side of ourselves, and I can speak personally, that denying a shadow side of ourselves only leads to that manifesting in unknown or unwanted ways. And so never to give myself permission to act out in violence when it is not absolutely necessary to defend myself or my loved ones. Never to use violence in manipulative or destructive ways. However, to start coming to terms with the existence of these qualities of apex predators, of fierceness, of aggression, and how is that present in my life? How do I sometimes want to artificially tamp this down or act like it doesn't exist? So these maybe are some of the thoughts that I have around reintroducing species, the second pillar of rewilding. So we've got restoring natural processes, we've got reintroducing species, and now we'll go to the third, creating biodiverse habitats. Rewilding can create more biodiverse habitats by allowing wildlife's natural rhythms to take over. Allowing wildlife's natural rhythms to take over. So I've thought a lot about, up to this point, and talked about mental models, mental operating systems. I think this one, creating biodiverse habitats, leads me to think more about my physical being. So creating more diverse habitats, allowing wildlife's natural rhythms to take over. Things like my diet, my sleep, my exercise. How am I creating this environment within my body, within my life, that can allow natural rhythms to take over? Also in my environment, and how I keep my room and how I keep my home. How about my environment in my relationships? How is the quality of my intimate relationships? And am I keeping things? Am I not speaking when things need to be spoken? Am I communicating with a clean and open heart and an open mind in my intimate relationships? What does that habitat of my relationships look like? How about how I order and I structure my day? How about in making sure that there's eating enough food but not too much, getting up and stretching during the day, moving my body, getting fresh air, sleep, getting enough sleep, maintaining regular sleep, creating this structure, knowing how to say no to certain things and knowing when to say yes to things that feed my life, that feed my heart, that feed my spirit, in order to allow these natural rhythms to take over. So I think I'll wrap it up there. This concept of rewilding, I've really been thinking a lot about it these past couple of days, and I want to continue to read about the application of rewilding as a conservation effort and think about how I can translate that into a personal growth effort, and how this can tie into a sense of personal agency. Um, just like a mountainside or a mountain range as an ecosystem, um, the animals and the plants and the weather there follow a set of laws that can't quite be understood. Um, patterns of weather. I'm thinking about essentially mysteries of the universe here that govern nature, and it's not because the laws of nature, even if we don't understand them, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. That there are things that govern this reality. There is, when nature looks so wild and so unpredictable, there is still a set of laws that govern what happens. For example, the laws that govern how our DNA is configured into a double helix. And what is the force that drives these things to happen? What is the spark, and what the order that follows? For example, how plants grow within a certain structure, how shells in the ocean are formed with certain structure and certain mathematical patterns. So there are laws that dictate these things. They may look wild to us, but there are still laws there, and there are laws that we don't quite understand. And so we can do our best to rewild, and we also have to know that there are laws at play that I don't quite understand as I'm working to rewild. But what I can do is I can use my personal agency to create, to the best of my ability, this environment, this ecosystem through which the expression of life can manifest, and through which I can present to the world, that I can show up to this interconnected system that I'm a part of in the most balanced and productive way. That I can let the currents of life, that I can let the spark of creativity show up and be a part of this beautiful thing that we're connected to. And so using my personal agency to create the best ecosystem is exciting to me, and I want to put some thought and some work, and I will continue to share my learnings. And in the meantime, if this resonated, I would love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, may you be wild and free, and I'll see you on the next one.